Put your hand flat on your stomach right now. Is it tight and hard, like something is pressurized underneath the skin? Is it puffed out by evening even though it was flat this morning? Or has it felt exactly the same, in exactly the same place for as long as you can remember, no matter what you've tried? Most people assume a belly is just a belly. Too much food? Not enough discipline? One problem with one fix. That assumption has cost people years of frustration chasing a solution that was never going to work on their body. Because here's the thing, a 2011 study in the journal Appetite tracked abdominal circumference across a single day and found fluctuations of up to 2 inches in people with completely normal digestion. 2 inches, same person, same day, nothing wrong happening. That's not a discipline failure. That's not even fat most of the time. That's a signal, and depending on which one you're reading, the cause and the fix are almost nothing alike. Think about it. You've probably been treating your stomach like it's one thing, one flaw to manage, one number to shrink, one enemy to negotiate with. But your midsection isn't a single system. It's actually 3 separate biological stories layered on top of each other. And depending on which one is running the show on any given day, the causes, the triggers, and the solutions are almost nothing alike. Here's what's actually happening, and once you see it, you're not going to be able to unsee it in your own body. The first one is the stress belly. And if you've ever felt your stomach get tight and hard during a bad week at work, before you've even changed what you eat, this is the one you already know intimately. Here's what's fascinating about it. Visceral fat, the kind that sits deep around your organs rather than just under your skin, has a significantly higher density of cortisol receptors than the fat just beneath the surface. Endocrinology research going back to the 1990s, particularly work out of Yale on abdominal fat distribution, found that this deep fat is almost uniquely responsive to stress hormones in a way subcutaneous fat simply isn't. Your body, when it senses chronic threat, and chronic doesn't mean dramatic, it means the low simmer of a demanding job, financial pressure, a relationship that's not going well, makes a decision. It treats that stress as a signal that famine or danger might be coming, and it starts building an emergency reserve, and it builds that reserve preferentially around your midsection, because visceral fat is metabolically the fastest fat to access in a crisis. It's not random placement, it's strategic placement. And here's the part that actually changes things. This isn't a one-time reaction, it's a loop. Chronically elevated cortisol disrupts sleep architecture, particularly reducing the deep slow-wave sleep your body needs to regulate hunger hormones. Poor sleep then raises next-day cortisol and drives up ghrelin, the hormone that makes you hungrier and specifically craves dense, quick energy food. That food gets stored, preferentially, around the visceral depot that's already primed for it by all those cortisol receptors. So you wake up tired, you're hungrier than usual, you eat to cope, and your stomach is a little tighter than yesterday. And none of that was a willpower story. It was a hormonal feedback loop, running exactly the way it evolved to run in a body that didn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a bad email from your boss. I want to be honest with you about this one, because the stress belly is the type where honesty matters most. It's not just cosmetic. Visceral fat is metabolically active tissue, meaning it releases inflammatory compounds directly into your bloodstream, and long-term studies out of the Mayo Clinic and elsewhere have linked chronically elevated visceral fat to increased cardiovascular risk independent of total body weight. This is the one type where the biology is quietly asking for your attention, not just your acceptance. But here's the strategic insight, and it flows directly from everything you just learned. Your body isn't trying to be fought at the level of food. It's already doing this for a reason, and your only job is to change the input, not fight the output. That means regulating the actual stress response, sleep consistency, nervous system downregulation. Even 5 minutes of parasympathetic breathing before meals does more to this belly type than another diet ever will, because you're addressing the signal your body is actually responding to. Now here's the second type, and this is the one that changes the most within a single day, which is exactly why it gets so misread. This is the bloated belly. And if you've ever felt completely fine in the morning and visibly uncomfortably distended by evening, Without eating anything you'd call excessive, this is your body running its own weather system, and it has almost nothing to do with fat at all. This is where it gets interesting. Your gut has its own nervous system, sometimes called the enteric nervous system, and it communicates with your brain constantly through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, largely mediated by the vagus nerve. When that communication gets disrupted by stress, by certain foods, by an imbalanced microbiome, gut motility slows down. Food and gas move through more sluggishly than they should, and that trapped gas is what physically distends your abdominal wall. Gastroenterologists have shown that people with even mild microbiome imbalances produce measurably more hydrogen and methane gas during digestion of the exact same meal compared to people with more diverse gut flora. Same food, different internal ecosystem, completely different result on the outside of your body. And this is layered with something else. Food intolerances that don't show up as an allergy, don't show up on a standard test, but that your gut still reacts to inflammatorily. Dairy certain FODMAPs, gluten-insensitive individuals, these create low-grade inflammation in the intestinal lining, and that inflammation itself contributes to distension separate from gas production. Add in water retention, which fluctuates with sodium intake, and for many people, with the hormonal shifts of a menstrual cycle, and you get a stomach that can genuinely be a different size on a Tuesday than it was on a Sunday, through no inconsistency of your own at all. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud. This fluctuation isn't a flaw in your body's regulation. It's your body's regulation working correctly and visibly. A stomach that changes size across a day is closer to normal physiology than a stomach that stays perfectly static would be. But socially, that fluctuation gets read as failure, as inconsistency, as not sticking to it. And that reading causes real embarrassment for people who did nothing wrong. If this is starting to sound like your stomach on a Tuesday versus a Sunday, stay, because the third type is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that responds the least to anything you've been taught to do about your stomach at all. The strategic insight for the bloated belly is different from the stress belly, because the input you're changing isn't your nervous system, it's your triggers, and the only way to find them is tracking, not guessing. A simple pattern, noting what you ate and how your stomach felt 6 and 12 hours later, reveals individual trigger foods with a precision that no generic elimination diet can, because your gut-brain axis and your microbiome are as specific to you as a fingerprint. Your only job here is to become a careful observer of your own system, not to punish it for reacting. And then there's the third type, the one that gets the most judgment and understands the least about itself, which is deeply unfair, because this is the type driven almost entirely by things you didn't choose. This is the genetic and hormonal belly, and it's about where your body distributes fat, not how much of it you're carrying. Researchers describe 2 broad patterns of fat distribution: android, which concentrates fat centrally around the abdomen, and gynoid, which concentrates it around the hips and thighs. Which pattern your body defaults to is substantially genetic, tied to your waist-to-hip ratio in a way that twin studies have shown runs in families independent of overall body weight. And here's what's genuinely fascinating. This isn't arbitrary biology, it's evolutionary logic. Central fat storage is metabolically efficient, quick to mobilize for energy, which made it advantageous in certain ancestral conditions, while hip and thigh storage historically served reproductive energy reserves. Your midsection, in other words, might simply be running an ancient genetic program that has nothing to do with anything you did this year or this decade. Insulin sensitivity plays a role too. Cells that are less responsive to insulin tend to preferentially store fat centrally rather than peripherally, which is part of why this pattern often shows up alongside other metabolic changes as people age. And then there's the hormonal piece, which reshapes this pattern at specific life stages, regardless of genetics. Estrogen has a protective effect that favors hip and thigh fat storage during reproductive years, and as estrogen declines during perimenopause and menopause, fat storage measurably redistributes toward the abdomen, a shift confirmed repeatedly in longitudinal studies of women's body composition across the menopausal transition. Testosterone follows its own pattern in men, with declining levels in andropause associated with a similar central redistribution. This is one of the best documented hormonal shifts in the aging body, and it happens on a schedule that has nothing to do with what you're eating. This is the type that responds the least to willpower. Full stop. No amount of discipline changes your fundamental fat distribution pattern or reverses a genetically wired waist-to-hip ratio, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to do. The strategic insight here is acceptance plus leverage. Accepting that your baseline shape is largely not a variable you control, while still leveraging the things that are, specifically insulin sensitivity, through resistance training and stable blood sugar, which can meaningfully shift how much fat accumulates within whatever pattern your genetics have already set. You're not fighting your blueprint, you're working the margins of it deliberately, instead of chasing a shape your genetics were never going to produce. So here's where all three of these actually land once you put them side by side. There is no such thing as a flat stomach default state that your body keeps failing to reach. That idea, the one that's probably been quietly running in the background of how you see yourself, isn't biology. It's a story diet culture told you, so a solution could be sold to you. What actually exists is three overlapping systems: a stress response doing exactly what stress responses have always done, a digestive ecosystem running its own daily weather, and a genetic and hormonal blueprint that was largely decided before you had any say in it. Most people are some blend of all three, shifting week to week, depending on what's actually going on in their life, their gut, and their hormones. None of them is a flaw. Each one is a readout. And now you actually know how to read it. So tell me, which of the three sounded the most like you? Is your stomach the one that tightens under deadline pressure? The one that changes shape between breakfast and dinner? Or the one that's been the same general shape since before you can remember no matter what you've tried? Drop it in the comments. And if you've noticed a specific pattern in how yours shifts across the day or the week, share that too. I'd genuinely like to know what you've been noticing without having the words for it until now.